Hello and welcome to Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director of the Heart of Missouri Chapter. And joining me on today's show, I have two guests, and the first guest is Kent Trimble, a member of our Board of Directors. And in the second half of our show, I have one of our seasoned volunteers and longtime volunteers in Carl Nappier. Kent, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, David. I think.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and I know that we're going to talk about you being on the board previously now, but you later on this month will be named as the chairman of the board of directors. And tell me about that board experience and what that has meant, what that means to you in being the chairman of the board.
Shortly after I came to town in 1995, I was asked to serve on the Red Cross board at that time, which was then called the Capital City Chapter. I was on it for the next 12 years, and during that time, saw a lot of changes and a lot of improvements and a lot of very fine and good things that the Red Cross was doing. Went through a couple of different executive directors, and each made their own contributions. I've always thought that the Red Cross was the type of organization that nobody really paid much attention to until we had disasters and situations, fires and floods and so forth that involved human suffering. And then suddenly the Red Cross is on the forefront of people's minds. There are so many different things that the Red Cross is doing that the American public does not know, prevention being one. And that is one thing that I think during whatever term of service that I can render as chairman, I hope we can focus as much on the prevention side as we do on the alleviation of suffering and human need.
What do you see the role of the board of directors?
First of all, to do anything possible to make sure that the Red Cross exists. And there have been times when, especially in smaller communities, where the Red Cross has not been able to sustain itself financially. So that would certainly be the first one. And I think you do that by a very good, sound fundraising program, but number two, having a board made up of smart people. And people who are interested in committing their time and efforts and personal resources to the work of the Red Cross, rather than just being able to say they were a member of the board and it looks good on their obituary in their future or the resume in the present. That we do have a working board. Secondly, what many people may not realize is that every chapter has a scorecard that the National Red Cross keeps. And after every line item, there's a dot, and that dot is either green, yellow, or red. And if it's green, it means we're doing some pretty fine work. If it's yellow, it means we're doing good work, but we could do better work. And if it's red, it means we have some work to do. And my goal as chairman would be to have that scorecard being nothing but green dots.
You mentioned earlier that when you were on the board before, there was the capital city or capital area chapter. With being now the Heart of Missouri chapter and encompassing the 21 counties that we do have, how will you as the board chairman, how do you see yourself in helping to engage those other counties as well?
Well, we have to. We're sending out volunteers all the time and recruiting volunteers in each of those 21 counties. You as the executive director probably could answer that question better than I can, because you are day-to-day involved with each of those other 20 counties. Everything seems to focus on Jefferson City in the minds of a lot of people. They pay their taxes into Jefferson City. They come here to do their tourism. We are the seat of state government. We are the possessors of the state capitol, of the governor's mansion, etc. What they don't realize is that geographically, we represent the heart of Missouri, even though the needs are elsewhere. So the bottom line is there are probably as much or more need for Red Cross in the other 20 counties than there are in the 21. And as a board, we need to have representation from those counties. Again, good people who are interested in doing the work of the Red Cross. And make sure that our fundraising efforts are strong in those other counties, our public relations efforts are good, and that the bottom line is people are served.
The board of directors now, and you just recently joined the board of directors just within this last year, what do you see as the big difference between the makeup of the board now as to what the board was then?
Well, it's bigger. Without casting aspersions on previous boards, I think we have some very talented people, very good civic-minded individuals. And I think I'm delighted in being asked to be chairman, but I'm certainly looking forward to working with them.
The board, the difference in the operation, the day-to-day operation of the board of directors, tell me the experience that you had back in '85 when you first joined the board. What made you become involved with the board of directors at that time?
One of the first things that came into my life was my father saying to me when I turned 18, when you come home from school tonight, we're both going to go down to the Red Cross and we're going to give blood. And I said, what am I giving blood for? And he said, well, one of your good friends has just been diagnosed with cancer and he needs your blood. And it just so happens I'm O negative, which is the universal donors.
They like you.
I ran out of excuses pretty fast. And that was my first exposure to Red Cross, and it gave me such a good feeling, not necessarily at the time, but later on, and my immaturity gave me a good feeling later on as I matured that this is one way in which humanity could be helped. At that time, and even today, for a lot of people, the Red Cross equals blood donation and nothing else. And blood donation is just one component of the American Red Cross system.
Okay. And I want to follow up on that because that really was my next question for you. And so often people do think, when they think of the American Red Cross, blood services is one of the first things they do think of. Disaster and health and safety is what my portion and my jobs with the Red Cross are involved in. And you got to really see on May 22nd of last year when the tornado hit Joplin and the after effects of that. You were called into service yourself. Tell us about that experience.
Well, as a funeral director, I serve on the Missouri Funeral Director and Embalmers Disaster Response Team. Missouri is one of the few states in the entire country that actually has a mortuary component at the statewide level. There's the federal DMORT team that a lot of people are familiar with. I was deployed within hours of it and was then assigned to the Family Assistance Center. And I have to relate a story that very briefly, our job was to receive families off-site. It was at one of the universities down there to help them fill out a 9-page questionnaire involving the identification of remains. There was one lady who came in, filled it out, gave me all of the information, and then she said, well, she knew her husband was deceased, was right there when he died. She said, well, I guess I've done as much as I can. If you need me, or if you need to contact me, and you can't reach me on my cell phone, I'll be over at the Red Cross tent because I think they probably need some help over there. Now, here's a woman just lost her husband, and yet the only thing she could think about was helping somebody else. That was extremely rare and really rocked me to actually experience that in another human being. That was the human spirit in its greatest manifestation. I was down there for a week. I can't begin to tell you the good things that the Red Cross did, and did long after I left, and even continues to do today. We still have volunteers down there.
Your role and a lot of your role, it's a necessary role that you had. Tell us about the phone call that you received that actually got you on your road down there.
Actually, I received 2 phone calls. I received one. I'm a federally licensed amateur radio operator, ham radio operator. Had just gotten back from our big convention in Dayton, about 30,000 hams out there. Got back about 8 o'clock. Had showered and shaved and was ready for bed. And I think I had actually fallen asleep when I got a phone call around 10:30 or so from Don Otto, who is the executive director of our Missouri Funeral Directors and Embalmers Association, saying, "We've been deployed." And coming out of my half sleep, I said, "What do you mean deployed?" He said, "Haven't you heard, half of Joplin is gone." And he said, "We need somebody to take one of our satellite phones, sat phones down there, because we don't think the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, has any kind of communications." So in packing then, within the hour or so, I received another phone call back saying, one of our men have reached the EOC, they have air conditioning, they have lights, they have telephone. And I said, "Does that mean I can go back to bed?" And he said, "Yes." So I went back to bed, and then about 4 a.m. I got a phone call saying from him, "I hate to do this to you, but I need you to take one of your SUVs and go to the office and put as many body bags as you can in that SUV and take it right on down to Joplin." So that's when the reality really hit me. 10 o'clock, they had maybe 7 or 8 fatalities, and overnight they began to realize it was going to be significantly higher. It turned out to be, I believe, 161 was the final total.
Well, Ken, I just want to tell you how much I look forward to working with you in this next year, and you serving as the chairman of our board of directors. It's a role that is really key to our chapter, and you've proved in the past, and I know it will in the future, the leader that you are in our community and will be for our chapter. And I'm glad that you joined me today. I know you were reluctant at first, but I'm glad that you came to be with us, and I look forward to being with you.
Well, looking forward to working with you too. One of the things you didn't ask me was to follow up on that question about the board's responsibility, one of which is to make sure you do your job.
Okay. Well, and I will do my best.
And I'm sure you will.
All right. Thank you. Stay with us. We're going to be right back. Carl Nappier is going to be joining us and telling us some of his stories about being a volunteer.
Diabetics, anyone over 60.
African Americans and Hispanics over 40.
We're all at risk for vision loss. Eye diseases can sneak up without symptoms.
But these diseases can be treated.
And vision loss prevented if they're caught in time. If you're in one of these risk groups,
or have a family history of eye disease,
please have a dilated eye exam once a year. Don't lose sight of eye disease.
Coming home can be hard if you're a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan. You may feel like you're all alone. But you're not alone. At IAVA.org, your fellow vets are all around you. Join our free online community, get the resources you need, and connect to other vets who know where you're coming from. IAVA.org. We've got your back.
Welcome back to Meet the Red Cross. I'm Dave Griffith, the Executive Director of the Heart of Missouri Chapter, and joining me for the second half of our show is Carl Nappier. And Carl is a very dedicated volunteer. As a matter of fact, last year he was voted and nominated and received our Volunteer of the Year award. Carl, welcome to the show. And
Thank you, Dave.
Glad to have you with us. Before we get into the stories, and we don't have a whole lot of time to go into a lot of them because I know you have a lot of stories that you could tell us today, but first off, tell us, how did you first become involved as a volunteer for the Red Cross?
In 2007, I lost my home completely in a disaster. It was about a year later. I opened a newspaper and seen there was an article in the paper about the Red Cross looking for mass feeding program at the Armory. So I thought, well, that'd be a good thing for me to do. I got a little spare time. I'm retired. So I went out to the Armory, got in there and took the class, and after the class was open, signed up for 2 more classes, went to the headquarters, took those classes, found out there was more classes, so I just kept taking classes until I found out what my needs and was really needed.
All right, let's go back. You mentioned you're retired. Tell us about that part of your life.
Well, I worked for Unilever for 24 years. I decided I wanted to retire out in the country, so I bought a small place, 30 acres, built me a small retirement home. I enjoy the outdoors, and I enjoy helping people out.
Okay. I think that's one of the key things, the messages that we try and get across, is that our volunteers are made up of a myriad of people and come from all walks of life. Isn't that true?
That's right.
Okay. And the training, tell us about the training that you had and how intense that was.
Well, the training was like going to school. I remember going back to school and saying, you know, I just can't take and look at this class and go home and do nothing. So I go home, take my material with me, I read it over, and then I get on the computer and I do some background checks and check out what the needs are, what the wants are. And I thought, this is what I need to do. This will fill in some spare time.
Okay. Why is that training important as a volunteer?
Gives you an idea of what the American Red Cross is all about, what our needs is, what our wants are, and how the operation runs.
Okay. And I guess it's incumbent upon us that we let our audience know that a lot of them want to volunteer, and they'll come down, they'll show up when a disaster happens, but those that are deployed are those that have received that training. And to what degree, on the deployment that you've had, how has that been related to the training that you've had?
Well, it's like this. If you walk into a room and there's 5 people in there, you're able to take care of those 5 people without too much problems. But with the training, we're able to take up to thousands, maybe 2,000 people in a building. We'll find out what their needs are, what their wants are, and we're able to take care of them as far as shelter, fooding, clothes, and also help them get them on the path of recovery. And that's one of the main things that we really go forward for, is getting our clients on a path to recovery.
Okay. How many deployments have you been on, Carl?
I think that's number 9. The first couple of years I was in the Red Cross, I went out to 1 or 2. But last year, I left April 25th and didn't get back home until October 1st, and I was on deployments all through that time.
Okay. Tell us about some of those.
I think they all set out in your mind of what's special, but the one that really gets me is the one in Minot, North Dakota. I was on the phone center. I was answering the phone and putting these people to some of the needs they want, who to contact and everything. And a little old lady called me up and told me their husband was in the hospital. He had had a stroke. She didn't want him to go back because the house was completely destroyed. And she was looking for somebody to help her get her things out that they could recover. Well, I told her I'd check in onto it. I'd put her on the list, and she said, don't put me on no list. I've been on that list 4 or 5 times. She said, all I want is somebody to come over and help me. I said, well, I'll do my best. Give me your phone number, and I'll see what I can do. She said, okay. Got her phone number, hung up the phone. The phone rang again, and it's this pastor in Minot, North Dakota, said he had 4 or 5 teenage boys that wanted to do some work Saturday. If there's any place that they could go to help out? And I said, yes, if you'll just hold on, I'll give you a phone number. You call this lady here, and she will talk to you, and I'm sure you can help her out. He hung up the phone. I called her immediately, and the phone was busy, and I left a message on the recorder. So I hung up the phone. 3 minutes later, the little lady called me back and told me a preacher called her and said they were coming out Saturday and going to take all their stuff out of the house then. Well, I kept in touch with her all the way up to the day that I left the deployment there. I got her name, her telephone number, and an address, and told her I'd keep in touch with her. So after I got back in October, I made a point to call her, and she was just so thrilled. So I can't tell you how many times she told, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it was just something that felt good to me.
Okay. What, how does that being deployed, how does that all begin? I mean, are you just at home and you get a phone call, and how quickly do you need to be ready to go?
Well, you take your training, you become eligible to be deployed. They'll call you, and you got 6 hours. They'll call you and say 6 hours you may be deployed. Well, the first 3 hours, you're packing and getting everything set up, so when they call you back, that's it. They'll call you back in about 3 hours and say, you know, in 3 hours, you got to be on the road. So in 3 hours, you're at the headquarters, getting your paperwork done, and then you're on your way.
Okay. Your most recent deployment, I think, was to Wichita, Kansas. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tell us about that deployment.
I was really impressed, especially with the Red Cross down there. One of the things that we teach in our Red Cross process is being prepared. Now, that was a pretty good-sized tornado went through that trailer court, and there was not a life, or there were some minor injuries, but those people were prepared for the kind of disaster they would need. They were able to get their clothes and some of the stuff that they need out of their homes, put them in their vehicle, and go to a safe place. When I got down there and found out that it was such a chaos down there, the homes were so destroyed, you could not go in on the streets because the streets were completely blocked. They got bulldozers in there. The Red Cross went in, made street sheets, contacted these people, called them, got them on our list, made personal contacts with these people to find out what their needs and so forth was. And that's what part of the Red Cross is, being prepared for a disaster.
And as a volunteer, you're on the front lines of that preparedness. And what are some of the classes that you have been directly involved in training those people like those that are there in that trailer park? What does that training look like?
Well, it's some paperwork, some book work, and most of it is just common sense. What would you do in case of an emergency? Mass feeding. When you talk about mass feeding, if we have a national disaster here, we have to house approximately 6,000 people in the Jeff City area. The Red Cross goes around and finds these places that we can set up shelters, places for mass feeding, and what our support agencies help us with as far as food and other needs, medical, dogs, kennels, pets, and that's what it really amounts to, is the good training you get, and once it's there for forever.
You brought up the kennels, and I think that's something that we think about the mass care that we have for people, but our pets are a big part of our lives as well, and that's something that is near and dear to a lot of our hearts, isn't it?
Yes. A pet nowadays is just part of the family. You go home, you got to take care of that pet just like you would your family. I love animals. I lived on the farm most of my life. I would love to have an animal, but I know when I go on deployments, if I'm gone for 30 days, what's going to happen to my animal, my dog, my pet? It's part of your family. You get used to them, and to be without him for 30 days or with 30 days, it kind of makes you wonder. And then when these people have a disaster, that's one of the things that we do. We'll find a kennel or someplace to set up that they can bring their dog. Now, we don't allow dogs and animals inside the shelters, right, but we do have areas outside the shelter that you could be right there with your animal.
Yeah. You know, we were just down in, I just went down to Joplin about 3 weeks ago to take some donors down there and take the local television station down there. And that was one of the first things that they did there at Missouri Southern. One of the first ladies that showed up there, they said, was a lady and her dog. And they hadn't thought about the pet part of it, but they turned their racquetball courts into a kennel, and and they actually allowed them to sleep. You could bring your cot down and you could sleep with your pet. And during that kind of a disaster and that kind of traumatic experience, your pet is something that would be a real comfort to you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Carl, I want to talk just very briefly about when I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you were the Volunteer of the Year last year. Tell me about that, how that made you feel, and what kind of responsibility you have with that.
Well, after I retired, I wanted something to do besides just farming, taking care of animals and putting gardens in. And when I seen this ad in the paper, I thought that would be a good thing. But I always look for a different project too. And when I got involved with the Red Cross, I talked to Philip, my director there, and told him, I'm interested in doing something a little bit more special. And I was looking for a truck, just a project truck, that was it. And he was telling me about this. They had an old ERV setting up at the service station that they'd like to get to. And I said, I'll buy it. I changed it in. I've got the Red Cross logo on it. I've got all kinds of information. I go to parades, street fairs, let everybody know what the Red Cross is always about.
Well, I know the ERV, and if you're in Jefferson City and you drive down McCarty Street, you can see Carl's ERV there. And one of the things that I really appreciated about that, and that is, well, number one, the fact that you would do that on your own. But number two is it sends a message that if you want to be a volunteer, that you can. And I think that there are a lot of people out there like you, Carl, that would like to volunteer and be a part of it, but so often we just don't pick up the phone, or we don't come in. In the last minute that we've got here, I'd like for you just to put out an appeal. What would you say to people if they're thinking about volunteering?
Well, let's take for example, if we have 6,000 people that we have to take care of in the Jeff City area, out of those 6,000 people, how many of it is going to be you, is going to be involved with that? You come in, you're prepared, you do take the training, and we'll set you up what you need to get us out on the road then. But the backbone of the American Red Cross are the volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers, and we're always constantly looking for volunteers. If you like logistics, we've got classes for that. If you like blood, we got classes for that. Life-saving, mass feeding, mass distribution, driving a truck.
Okay. Well, Carl, I want to thank you so much. And Carl is right. The bulk of what we have, 95% of the boots on the ground, are volunteers with the American Red Cross. And it's people in the 21 counties that we serve. 340 of those people are volunteers just like Carl. And if you'd like to volunteer, we'd love to talk to you. If you call down to the office, and if you ask for Carl, he's probably there, because he's there an awful lot. And Carl, I just want to thank you personally for all you do for us and being there for our people every single day.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing some more people.
All righty. Thank you for joining us for Meet the Red Cross for this edition, and we'll see you next time.